Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel, and welcome to a missing person segment. Now, in the last couple months, we've gotten a lot more subscribers. Not a huge amount, but enough. And I wanted to start this missing person segment off with how we established ourselves in this space. I was doing research at a national park. National park ranger came up to me and they stated that they'd been researching missing people and they thought that there was an issue there. A second one came up, said the same thing. I left, contacted some law enforcement people, and that's how it all got started. And since then, it's been almost 11, 12 years now, I've documented cases in 23 U.S. national parks and many other national parks around the world. I want to go through the list in the U.S. for you just for a minute so you can understand the magnitude. Now, this is not BLM land. This is not U.S. Forest Service land, because we've got those as well. These are just national parks, and these are not national monuments, just the parks. So, where do we have the most national parks where people missing? California. And which park has the most missing people out of any other national park? Yosemite. Now, to start off that list in California, Joshua Tree. If you've never been there, it's a desert. It's very deadly during the summer. I wouldn't go there unless I was very well equipped and knew the territory very well. I've documented several cases there where people have vanished and never been found. Yosemite. I've said so much about this location. Probably the largest pieces of granite in the world. And right in between two of the giant pieces of granite runs a river. Fits our profile. So many people missing from there. They are the only national park that has released a list of the missing. Why is that? Because we already identified all the missing people in that national park. They had nothing to lose by releasing it. But they haven't released all the missing people in all the rest of the national parks. Filed a Freedom of Information Act request against the Park Service about 9 years ago. And what they told me was if I came up with $34,000, I could have a list and they'd go find one. Since then, I've learned a lot. Park Service is broken up into 5 different areas across the U.S., regions. Each region has a group of supervising special agents. Special agents are the detectives in the national parks. And each one of those offices has a supervisor. Each one of those special agents has all the missing persons cases in their jurisdiction. Here's what it would take to get a list of missing people. The special agents go through their file, it's in their desk, they just write down the name, the date of the disappearance, and the location. They hand it to the supervisor, supervisor staples it together, sends it to headquarters, and in less than 10 minutes, you will have a list. They want to charge me $34,000 for that. I told them that I would send a computer to each one of those supervising special agents if they didn't have one, and give them the computer system needed to track missing people. I didn't even get a response. So Yosemite, the only national park right now that has a list of missing people. Also in California, Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Parks. I've written about them a lot. Kings Canyon and Sequoia are on the perimeter of Yosemite. Lassen National Park in Northern California, and Point Reyes National Park, north of San Francisco on the Pacific coast, has notoriety of having just women missing. A very odd place. Spent a lot of time there when I lived in the Bay Area. It's beautiful. Not a lot of frivolity at that national park. Mainly just a road that goes up the coast, a couple of points to pull over and enjoy the view. Going north, Crater Lake National Park. I've written a lot about this place. In fact, our first movie, Missing 411, which you can watch on Amazon, Missing 411 is filmed a lot at Crater Lake, interviewing people associated with Crater Lake, and the search is there. A lot of strange things there. Going to Washington, Olympic National Park, several people missing. In fact, in the last 6 months, I've done videos on 2 of them. Then you have North Cascades and Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is probably right behind Yosemite for the number of missing people. A lot. A lot of people that shouldn't have gone missing went missing at Mount Rainier. Then going over to Idaho, you got Craters of the Moon. Documented people missing there as well. Another desert landscape. Then going to Montana, Glacier in my backyard. Documented several people missing there. And Yellowstone, which is in southern Montana and part of Wyoming. In Alaska, Glacier Bay National Park and Denali. Glacier Bay had a disappearance of one of the most strange cases I ever wrote about. Very strange. Then going to Arizona, Mesa Verde National Park. I've told you about the entire Native American population at one point went missing there. It's like they just picked up and left. Utensils on the table, etc. When you visit there, the National Park Service will tell you, we have no idea where they went or why they left the area. But they lived in cliff dwellings. Yes, a cliff separated where they lived from the valley floor. A lot of people say it was because of other warrior tribes trying to get to them. I don't know. And then, of course, you have Grand Canyon National Park. Many, many people missing from there under very, very strange circumstances. Then the other national park that was in my backyard for 10 years, that's Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. Spent a lot of time in the park, spent a lot of time researching cases from the park. One of the few parks where I went there and the press information officer helped me get the list of missing people at the time that were there. And she told me at the time that she thought every national park had a list of all their missing people in the communications center, dispatch center. Since that time, I've been told this isn't true, but she did give me the list of missing people from that park, and I've documented them. I appreciated that. And the honesty was rare. Haleakala National Park in Hawaii. Big Bend National Park. And, of course, Grand Teton National Park, where there was an Irishman just within the last year and a half missing from Grand Teton that hasn't been found. Now, what is it about this national park missing people? Why wouldn't the national park want us to know who was missing? If they actually think their attendance would go down if they released it, they're insane. Just as an example, locations where there have been Bigfoot sightings, parks, etc., the attendance went up. People wanted to visit. And I know personally that some of you, the villagers, have gone on travel to different areas specifically to look at where people have disappeared. I've done this hundreds of times, trying to understand what is it about these areas that may be different. And once I get to the area and I see it, a lot changes for me. So it's worth going. And then national monuments. Oregon Pipes National Monument, Southern Arizona. I've written a lot about them. And of course, there's many others I've written about, but I didn't include them in the national park list. I've tried to get cooperation from the national parks several times on many levels. I tried to get a film permit at Yosemite National Park, and I was given and sent one of the most rude letters you can imagine from a national park supervisor who was in charge of movies, permits. They see it as their own domain. They don't see it as belonging to you. They see it as belonging to them, and they control it. I applied for a film permit, sent it overnight express tracked. They said they lost it. They never got it. I said, well, I sent it. It says it got tracked into Yosemite National Park and went to your mailroom. Oh, that's how it probably got lost at the mailroom. You need to send another one. This is after 6 weeks I waited. Just a pure stall tactic. Lack of ethics by some people. A complete lack of ethics. Because when I applied the second time, they stated, oh no, we need this, we need that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And then the film permit process was overturned by a Superior Court judge. They said it was illegal. It was inhibited our national First Amendment rights. Well, then the National Park Service appealed it a few years ago, got in front of a liberal judge, and the judge reinstated it. So now we have to go back and get film permits in parks, which costs money, which a bureaucrat will decide if you can film in their park. When you and I could go in there with our 4K camera as private citizens and film all we want, they can't say anything. But if you're there to make a movie, if you're there for professional photography, even still photography, if you're making money, you need to get a permit. But you didn't know that. It seems as though that the national parks and part of our government have lost sight of who they work for, which is you and me. And when the park starts to charge me money to tell a story of missing people in their parks, and they obstruct and then refuse to allow us to film in there, it's pretty abhorrent. I've had many of you say, hey Dave, you just tell me what you need filmed there, and I'm a part-time videographer. I'll go in and film anything you want and send it to me. Thank you. But the idea is to film with the victim's family at the location where the victim disappeared. Get their opinion, get their thoughts, get their emotions. But I really don't know where we're going to go from here. I don't see many of these parks giving me the permit to go in. But I'll be fighting for you to get in and film the stories in the future, hopefully. Now, the story that I'm going to talk to you about today occurred in Death Valley National Park. Death Valley has had strange disappearances before, and that name Death Valley is appropriate. Just in the last couple weeks, Death Valley has had record high temperatures, sizzling. And when you're not used to 110 plus degree temps, this can kill you pretty quickly. And you have to be prepared. Number one, you don't go into these parks without a car in good condition. Because if your car overheats, there's no help out there. There's none. So be very, very careful and carry tons and tons of water. So the case I'm talking to you about involved a young man named Richard Hill, 17 years old. He went missing November 27th, 1960 in Death Valley. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Roland Hill, had traveled with Richard over Thanksgiving holiday from their home in Alameda, California. I've always said it's important where you live. Alameda is an island. It really is. It sits almost right next to Oakland, California. Where Oakland is an absolute cesspool of a city, Alameda is nice. Got their own police department. The island kind of separates them from Oakland. Sometimes the Cretans from Oakland come over, but not many. So they were planning a holiday, Thanksgiving holiday trip. They take off and they head down to Death Valley. About a 6 or 7 hour drive from Alameda. Well, Richard knew they were going, and he had planned to climb a place called Telescope Peak. And Puck is sitting right under where I'm sitting, so the executive producer of the show is right on top of things. Now, Telescope Peak, at the trailhead to Telescope Peak, this is what the sign says. At 11,049 feet above sea level and in the middle of the wilderness, Telescope Peak is the highest point in Death Valley National Park. Named for the great distances seen from its summit, the mountain offers views of more than 100 miles in any direction, including Mount Whitney in California and Mount Charleston in Nevada. Mountain mahogany, pinyon pine, and scattered junipers predominate in the lower stretches of the trail, while the purple blossoms of sage and lupine flowers enjoy the full sunlight and well-drained soils at higher elevations. Even higher, the decreasing temperatures and shorter growing seasons cause a shift in vegetation to limber pines and to vulnerable bristlecone pines. The rocky summit is punctuated with wind-sculpted trees, low-growing plants, and stunning views. Now, here's the peak, the highest peak in that range from the valley floor. It's a beautiful place, but it's not for the weak. Trust me on this, not for the weak. So, I did this map for you so you can kind of understand where Death Valley is. This is it right here. And over here is the Sequoia National Forest, Kennedy Meadows, Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park, and Yosemite. Right across from there. This is all desert through here. Telescope Peak on the map. Bakersfield, California right here. So you get the drift of what I'm talking about. I couldn't be more in my way, but I love her, so she can stay. Now, Richard planned to climb Telescope Peak. The trail for it starts at a place called Mahogany Campground. Richard was described as physically fit, very physically fit, and smart. If you take the trail from Mahogany, round trip to the summit and back is 12.2 miles. Not an extraordinary long distance. It's rated as a challenging hike, but it only raises 3,244 feet in 12 miles, which is a pretty gradual incline. So Richard told his parents that he'd meet them on November 27th, it's a Sunday, at about 4 or 5 in the afternoon at their campsite. Now, one site said he was going to meet them on the road, but all the reports state he was going to meet them back at their campsite. And on that afternoon, folks were waiting for him. He didn't show up. So at 5 p.m., they called the National Park Service. They actually didn't call him. They went out driving and found somebody. Now, they were concerned because on that day, a big storm hit the park and hit that summit hard. There was some snow, some rain, and heavy winds. And the hills were concerned. By the time the National Park Service police got to the site and took the report, it was already getting dark, and they couldn't make their way up. So they called the Navy, if you can believe this. November 28th, searchers got to the summit, and they used the Naval Proving Grounds Search and Rescue Team and Mountain Rescue Search and Rescue. They're a very well-known group in that Southern California Sierra area. It's actually called the China Lake Naval Search and Rescue Group. And they responded that morning with 20 searchers. And they started climbing early. And they faced 40 to 50 mile an hour winds near the summit, blowing snow. And they were able to make their way to the summit. And they knew that on the summit there's a little box. A lot of times it's a military canister, ammunition canister. Other times it's other things. But in the box, they opened it up, and there's a register. And every register is a little different. Sometimes it's just a little paperback book. Sometimes it's a pad of paper. What happens is everyone just puts the date. They submitted. You put your name and you write maybe a sentence. Great day, blessings, something whimsical. Well, they never said what Richard put on there, but they did confirm that he signed it and he reached the summit. So stop here for a second. If he reached the summit, then he should have been able to make it down quickly. Trail is steep going up in spots, but coming down, it's not that dangerous. It's extremely well defined. You're not going to get lost. And they were on the summit and they were looking. And in fact, they were on that summit and looking for 5 days. National Park Service sent a series of rangers up and searched other areas on a grid pattern. And the weather cleared for part of that time, and they put planes and helicopters up looking for any sign of Richard. They couldn't find anything. On December 5th, the National Park Service superintendent named Granville Lyles stated that they believed that Richard was deceased, and they presumed him dead, and they terminated the search. Now, I've told you before, but let me reiterate this. If you're a family member and the Park Service puts that tag on somebody that's missing, presumed deceased, they're no longer missing. Scout's honor. According to Park Service rules, if somebody is presumed deceased, they're not missing, they're dead. And they don't have the same criteria for searching any longer. But as a family member, you better fight hard if you think there's a 1% chance your family member's alive that they keep searching. A lot of times this can be overwhelming because they could surround you with 4 or 5 search superintendents, chief rangers, and they can just start hammering at you. They do not want bad publicity, and they do want you to be happy. If you're not happy, you say it. Don't be intimidated by them. Well, the hills were devastated. And they got back into their car and they made that lonely 6-hour drive back to Alameda alone. Just husband and wife. Richard was gone. I've said this before, that I cannot fathom the depression that I would be in making that drive home without my boy. I can only imagine what it was like for them. And then to get home and feel helpless that they can't do anything to find them. They don't know what happened. Friends, this would be overwhelming. Well, the second organized search for Richard started May 6th, 1961. The superintendent called China Lake again and asked for the same people that were on the first search to come back out and search for a body. He also assigned a National Park Service team, and Inyo County sheriffs contributed search members as well. They made their way to the summit of Telescope Peak. A lot of the snow had melted. And guess what they found? They found Richard Hill in an area that had been searched previously many times, in an area where they should have found him, and in an area he should have been able to get down. I could find not one article that says cause of death. Now, what the Park Service does in cases where you know a specific name and you ask for them to release all the reports related to a certain case, they will release just Park Service reports. They won't release the coroner's reports of the body, the cause of death. A lot of times they won't release search and rescue reports. A lot of times they won't release helicopter pilot reports because they're subcontractors. In one instance, in the newspaper of this one search, it cited a helicopter pilot that had flown search and rescue in this one park. This was like 3 or 4 years before I heard about this case. Well, and it said the helicopter company you work for. I just called the company. I said, hey, could I talk to pilot so-and-so? Sure. He gets on the phone. I said, hey, I'm a writer. I understand that you flew search and rescue for blah, 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 blah. I'd like to ask you some questions. Sure. Told me the condition of the body. Told me exactly where it was found. He told me his own personal thoughts. He explained the anomaly of the event. Those kind of things. I learned more from that pilot than I ever did from the Park Service. Frustrating? Very. Because, folks, why? Those reports belong to you and me. A public employee that we're paying their salary wrote those reports. According to the Freedom of Information Act, we have a right to those reports. And to this day, I still cannot get any more reports out of the Park Service. About 9 years ago, they declared me a commercial requester. Yes. Which required that I pay an exorbitant fee. It's like $10 per page, a $250 search fee, whereas a normal person pays nothing. But because I'm a commercial requester, because I'm writing books, they want to rip me and stop me from searching by charging these high fees, which they were successfully, and they did do it. But I got friends, relatives, etc. that started doing it for me. I mean, these people are stupid. They think I'm not going to find a way around this. I got to say, I've used certain people's names, and they've done it for me so many times that I think there might be a commercial requester now. But why run interference on this topic? Is it because they know something unusual is happening in their parks and they can't control it? Here's the best one. The best one. I was recently in a park, a national park, and I asked to talk to the manager of the gift store in the park. Now, these gift stores are operated by people like you and me. You get a contract to lease the building from the Park Service. They give you terms and conditions you have to live by. You sign it, you open the store, you furnish it. So I talked to this manager and I said, you have a lot of great books in here. I don't see any Bigfoot books. And he goes, oh no. He giggled. He goes, the Park Service really hates those books. He said, there's a clause in our contract that says we can't even carry those books in our stores. I said, what? He said, yeah, we can't carry them. Park Service says that Bigfoot doesn't exist, so we can't carry them. I said, but I saw books about ghosts. He goes, yeah, isn't that hypocritical? He goes, I want to carry the books, but they won't let me. So here's the question. I know that there's several attorneys out there that are watching, and you guys write to me all the time. I appreciate it. So here's an opinion I'm asking you for. Can the Park Service do that? Can they indiscriminately say, no, you can't carry certain types of books? They're our government. Is that a violation of my First Amendment rights of my ability to get a book into a governmental bookstore? I'm asking all the brilliant attorneys out there. You want to take a case on? I'll give you my case. And we'll go to the Supreme Court with it. But that's how hard it is to deal with the Park Service. I just wanted to give you an overview of it. So, as far as Richard Hill, unknown cause of death, found in an area previously searched, etc., etc., etc. Just like a typical case. And by the way, the searchers did a heroic task trying to find him when he originally disappeared, so I appreciate their efforts. And if any of the Hill family are still listening, I'm very reverent to your loss. I'm very sorry. In the meantime, smile when you're out in public. Be nice to people. We need more people being nice to each other. And we need something in our society to turn around and make our country great again. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here. If you like the video, give me 2 thumbs up. Please share it on your social media. Huck is sound asleep. Hopefully, by the grace of God, I'll be back again. Paulides out.